We are here to have serious conversations every weekday morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Ndu, before we hear the proverb, traffic.
Yeah.
And this thing that happens at General Motors every morning, heading towards town and heading out towards the airport as well at the General Motors. There's a roundabout with jets onto the highway. What on earth?
There's no acceleration lane.
It's a circus.
What
So you
on
try to
earth
look every
is
day.
that?
Yes, so if there's no police individual who, for instance, halts traffic coming from the airport, it's a complete mess.
I think the main problem there is the design. So the U-turn is opposite. So they've made it that it should be like the one at James Gishuru,
Yes.
so that it's easier for those who are doing the U-turn not to then meet with the ones who are coming from the other side. So there's a gridlock that because of the design of that.
So it's an S-turn as opposed to a U-turn. Because you're going like this.
Let's just call it a confused turn.
They've put a roundabout
Yeah.
in a place that is just requires a U-turn. A roundabout is a place which you have at least 4 in and 4 out. There are 4 in and then there are 4 exits. Here there's only 1 in and 1 out. Why would you have a circle? It's just we ask ourselves many questions in this country, and we don't have many answers.
There's
in this
reprieve,
country.
though. Every once in a while, they shut it
They
down.
close the road,
Yes,
for a couple
just-
of days,
yes.
then do your thing.
So
and
you
they
can go
open it up.
further down.
And
to
if you're
the
caught
airport.
unawares, you're going to turn around at Cabanas, if not the airport.
And if you miss it, you might find yourself in Machaco.
There's that
But,
little detail,
hey.
yes. So they do think about this from time to time.
So there's consideration once
There
in a
is
while.
consideration, yes.
Whether it gives you solutions is a totally different story. But,
That one is crazy. Anyway, City has the day's proverb before we welcome and introduce our guests.
Good morning, boys and girls.
The proverb of the day is brought to you by Aquafresh Fresh Gel.
One more proverb from the country of Zimbabwe. But today's proverb, a ripened fruit does not cling to the vine.
A ripened fruit does not cling to the vine.
No, it doesn't.
When the time comes, it must leave the vine and fall to the ground.
Yes.
So just know your season, know your stage,
Actually, yes.
Yeah?
Exactly. Know when to let go.
know when to let go, know when to grow up.
Know when to move. Know when to change. Know the seasons of your life, essentially. That's what it's telling you. Yes.
whether you're the fruit or the vine.
Or the ground.
Or the ground. Happy to welcome the fruits. Okay, a good one.
Brush your teeth twice a
Want
day
to
with
talk about
Aquafresh Fresh Gel, the
sustainability
secret to
and
long-lasting
conservation.
fresh breath, strong teeth,
Advancing
and healthy
multisectoral
gums.
commitment to achieving Kenya's NDCs, nationally determined contributions, ahead of COP27 talks, which are going to be taking place in Egypt in November. We have 2 guests in the studio. Dr. Edward Mungai is a global sustainability expert. He's a lead consultant at KCI Consulting Limited. He joins us in the show. And Benedict Omolo is the chief officer in charge of operations and strategy at the Standard Group PLC. Ben Omolo,
Yes.
congratulations. You make your second appearance on the show.
It-
You're doing well. Clearly, you impressed the bosses.
Thank you.
Welcome. Dr. Mungai, it's the first time you are in the studio, but not the first time that you're joining us on the show to talk about climate change and everything. It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me and looking forward to the conversations.
Yes, that's the hot seat of the Situation Room. It doesn't feel the same when you're out there in the cozy confines of your residence. It feels much better when you're here, right? Feels, you now feel like you belong, like you're part of the show.
True to it, true to it.
Okay.
And looking forward to the hot seat,
Very good. Dr. Mungai is a global thought leader in sustainability, an author, a researcher, an advisor, an entrepreneur, and authority on corporate responsibility and sustainable development. He's acclaimed for championing environmental excellence, sustainable consumerism and production, and the triple bottom line. Where? It's a privilege to have you here with us, sir.
Thank you, Eric.
Let's begin. From the very beginning, before we go into the COP27 and the talks, whenever nowadays sustainability has become like, the catchphrase. Every organization wants to throw in the word sustainability somewhere. Every person wants to throw in the word sustainability. What exactly is this sustainability?
Well, as you said before, it's about the triple bottom line. For a very long time, we have heard that the role of business is to make as much value to the owners, meaning the shareholders. But in the recent past, there is now debate where we want to see companies becoming more responsible. Now, of course, as companies try to be responsible, of course, you'll assume there is those who are just cheating us that they are responsible. But on the other hand, there is those who are deeply entrenched within the responsibility. Now, in the recent past, we've also seen consumers as an example, wanting to buy from more sustainable companies as opposed, to traditional companies. And Eric, just to give you an example, if you go into a supermarket as an example, you'll find that more Kenyans nowadays, they just don't throw things into their shopping cart. They are trying to understand what is the makeup of this product. And that's the genesis of this whole conversation. When people understand that we have a duty and responsibility to take care, of our people, of our environment, and also at the same time create value. And based on that, now companies have realized that 64% of Kenyans want to buy from sustainable companies. So what's the option? Is for them to go in and try to come and put measures that then will appeal to Kenyans and to people that they're indeed sustainable. Of course, as I say, there are many who are greenwashing. And greenwashing is about telling, cosmetic social responsibility, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
But there are those who have put it within their business model and championing it, and it's creating value for them also.
As a consumer, how can I tell? How can I tell the greenwashers from the real sustainable companies?
Well, I think it's more from the commitments and what we've seen in the recent past. Companies are going ahead and doing what is called sustainability reports. In the recent past, almost on a weekly basis, we are seeing companies coming up with sustainability report. And when you see companies coming in sustainability report, they have truly, engaged in it, and they have statements that, convince. And of course, we as the experts, we have to go into those reports and assure those reports. Kind of another auditing, to just make sure that, indeed what they are saying is clear. Of course, the other way to know that it is not greenwashing is where, you need to interrogate a little bit more. When Equity Bank, for instance, say they have wings to fly. What does that mean for them? And what does it mean for Kenyans? Is it something that they are selling to us just for us to be convinced that, they are doing a social thing and therefore we should buy from them? But it's also about looking at, the genesis of that and understanding how well does it sit within communities and how does it help communities? And from that perspective, then we can say, indeed, this company is a sustainable company.
But if we were to get granular, what exactly then does it mean for a company to be sustainable? Is there a checklist 1 to 10, and you say if you meet the marks on 1 to 10, then indeed you are a sustainable company, so that I or you as a consumer, I am purchasing from said company and I know for sure that this company then is sustainable? What are we looking at? Exactly.
Well, again, is very new area, as I say, and I don't think we have gotten to a level where we have a checklist. But what we do have is to look at the products that the company is making and try to understand, how is that product made, for instance. Now, let's talk about, just giving an example of a brewery. Is about understanding the beer that I'm consuming, how much water, have been used to make that 1 liter of beer that I'm taking, as an example. Let me give an example here. Globally, to make a 1 liter of beer, it takes about 2.53 liters of water. Now, if a brewery is telling us that he's using 7 liters of water, then you have to question that. Because then that, from the water perspective, is not a sustainable business. It's also about looking at, some of the efforts that an organization is doing. For instance, we have seen people presenting dummy checks that you cannot take to the bank. And they are saying this, we are contributing to X endeavor. It is good for us to question, well, if it is mosquito nets they are giving, how does that actually connect with their business model? Or are they just hoodwinking us, by telling us that we are doing X, so that then probably we can be able to buy from them? So that's the disconnect. That's the disconnect, and that's, what we need to see more companies, championing the idea of sustainability.
It seems like a lot of work.
Well, it's not, I would say, for those who understand it, is not a lot of work. Well, from a company perspective, what it means is that you look at your business model, look at your strategy, and see where can you actually be able to embed this thing. Let me give an example. Standard Group here. You can do sustainability for the purposes of saving costs. Look at the writing system here is LED. Now, you had a choice to use the traditional one. This is saving you 75% of the energy consumption within this building. Truly, it is because, Ben and others have understood that if we go the sustainable way, it means that we'll cut cost. And because of that, we put it as part of the DNA of our organization. So for those who understand it, it will be easier. For those who don't understand it, they will be jumping here and there, right and left, center, trying to figure out what is it that we can do. And in that confusion is how they will greenwash us.
Sure. So, Ben, do you find that more and more businesses then, even looking at the example of the Standard Group, do you find that more businesses then are going the sustainable way to be more commercially viable, or going the sustainability way to be more sustainably viable?
Well, more corporates are taking on a sustainable model so that they are able to ensure that their business not only is attractive to the customer and the consumer, but also that they have got the supply chain ultimately is equally sustainable, so that they are not damaging the environment in which they operate. So if we take the example of Standard Group, some of the initiatives which we have done, for example, is that we have the solar system, which provides us almost about 80% of our daytime energy consumption. So that's a practical thing which we have done. You're aware that now we also have our water treatment plant at the cafeteria, which is also part of recycling the borehole water which we are doing. We will go into the next stage of bottling. And one of the conversations we are having is, let's not bottle it in plastic. Let's try and use bottles, glass bottles. Of course, glass bottles would be more expensive. But when you look at the overall impact on the environment, plastic would be cheaper. But in the long run, we are then having more pollution because of how you've got to work with plastic. And so when we look at the whole model, it's basically businesses coming in and saying, how do we then have a sustainable and more responsible approach to what we are doing? For us, again, as Standard, one of the things that we are doing is engaging in the Fruity Schools campaign, basically just engaging with young people so that we plant fruit trees in schools, provides both good fruits and vitamin C then to the children, but also the consciousness that we then create in their minds about growing trees and ensuring that they have a sense of engaging with this whole conversation on sustainability.
And I think just to add into what Ben is saying, I think the broader, the bigger picture is that doing good is good business. For instance, the examples that Ben is giving us about the various initiatives that company or Standard Group is doing, is not, well, it's good business, but at the same time, please look at it from a point of environment. We are doing good to the environment. It's sustainability is moving organization, from a point where we used to do things to feel good. Yeah. But now we do good things to do good business. That is exactly what sustainability is about. And that, I think, is the race that we are seeing now, as Eric was saying, more and more companies trying to get into that space. Of course, you have confusion. Some are confused because they don't know exactly how to do it. Others, they know how to do it, and they've done it for more than 10 years, and they are reaping benefits from that.
Two questions come to mind. I'm thinking of what you're saying. It makes a great deal of sense. I'm thinking of the process of trying to ensure that people comply, and I'm looking at how an organization can move from being a watchdog, meaning you alert people, you get them to know, you get them to understand it, and then moving to the next step of getting them to internalize it. Essentially, you're fighting what we like calling this the tyranny of habit. People have been used to doing things in a certain way, and you're telling them, and that is from the people who produce and manufacture to those who also consume, and you're telling them, yes, this is the way you've been doing things, but the truth of the matter is that this isn't quite the way to do things. This is how to do it. What are some of the issues that you have encountered with regards to the resistance that you receive? Because it doesn't mean that, I'm not implying that it is negative. I'm simply saying, that's why I premised by saying, tyranny of habit. People are used to doing things in a certain way. But what have you encountered?
Well, it's indeed about awareness. And one of the things that I proclaim myself to be, I call myself a sustainability evangelist. You know, and I preach the gospel of sustainability in the sense that I want to convert many more people. And those convertees should also be able to convert people. Why? Because it's a question about, you know, where we are coming from. Remember, sustainability before was located in marketing department, in PR department within organization.
Yep.
And that was truly what is called greenwashing at the highest level. Because what we were doing there is just, you know, telling stories which are not real. But as we help more people to understand that sustainability is about doing good as good business, then we start looking at the myths of sustainability. And I tell you, we have like 3-4 myths about sustainability, which most of the CEO are still stuck into those. Number one, that sustainability is for the big, rich, and old companies. And therefore, small companies will not figure it out. They will say, we continue with our tyranny of habits, our old ways of doing things, and hopefully let's leave that to Safaricom, to KCB and big companies to push that agenda. Now, the second part, it costs more. I think Ben told us in the beginning it costs more, but in the future, truly it makes a difference. That water, you know, recycling plant, the solar, costed money, you know, in the beginning. And the CFO, you know, and the accountants might see it as a cost. But in the future, you know, truly, that will be what, you know, it will have a payback. And that will be a benefit because in a couple of years, 80% of the energy here will be produced for free, if you like. The third part, you know, and very important, and this is what, you know, have derailed many of us not to move into the section, is about, you know, thinking about the skeletons in our closets. Meaning, in the past, we have done bad things. For instance, we have one woman board member. That's not acceptable when you have 12 men seated in that board. But we don't want to tell that. We want to hide kind of, you know, our old skeleton in the closet. But we must be able, if you are really committed to sustainability, you must go out and say, well, we produced 1 liter of beer using 7 liters of water. Going forward, we are on a journey. That's
We
the
are
most
committing
important.
to do this.
We are committing to move to 3 or to 4, and this is the journey that will pass. And I think those are the things, those are the challenges that we are seeing, you know, many companies not wanting to take it. Of course, the gospel is about telling small and medium enterprises, all the companies that are not already engaging, the benefits, you know, that they can achieve from sustainability.
Can I ask this question? It's a question I always ask anyway, so let me ask it of you. Do we teach sustainability in our colleges and universities? And do we engage with the Institute of Curriculum Development so that sustainability is actually taught in schools in one way or the other, embedded in one of the subjects that are taught? Why am I saying this? I'm going back to that same subject of habit. If people are aware of a certain way of doing things at an early age, it becomes normal. I'm saying this because I remember a friend of mine is the one who actually got me into this habit of not throwing things out of the window, rubbish. I used to be like everybody else. Eat a banana out of the window. So they told me, Chief, why don't you do this? Just have a plastic bag in your car or a bag and put everything there, then look for some place to take it. I get enraged now. Just this last week, I got enraged when I was behind a car and they kept throwing things out of the window. In fact, I wanted to drive and stop them and say, guys, what do you think you're doing? But it took that journey. So my question, is it taught?
Is the evangelist going to schools?
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, the schooling system have not embraced, you know, sustainability and environmental issues into the detail. For instance, they have supplementary materials that is used in schools to teach, but remember, it's supplementary. So it's not core materials. So what we would like to see, you know, is the curriculum really entrenched. Hopefully CBC, this probably will be one of the good things out of CBC where we see these issues being entrenched. Now, let's talk about the universities and universities and see whether do we teach sustainability. As I said, is a new phenomenon. What we have started seeing in some universities now putting, you know, units about sustainability. Going forward, we do expect, you know, that there will be courses both at the degree level, at diploma level, which are really speaking about sustainability. And indeed, many people want to be sustainability experts because they know and they want to commit to changing the way we do things.
What I'm asking, Dr. is, have you had conversations with university councils, boards, vice chancellors, administration, and the like? I'm saying this because our universities, for instance, in this country right now, are going through the throes of changing many things. Understanding that there are courses they've had for the longest time that may not bear as much relevance as they ought to. So when an opportunity like this presents itself, is this not a good opportunity to have a crusade?
It is, and that's why the evangelization is very clear. This forum that we are having here is hopefully, and they are listening, is about, and watching, is about, them start thinking about what are these things we need to put. Remember, the future of work. Those degrees that we are going to, to school to study, probably in another couple of years will not be relevant. So we must be able to put things that truly make sense and which the industry, which the market is asking for. And I think one of those things is sustainability and environmental responsibility.
Are there things that make sense within our context as African nations? And I think this is one of the biggest conversations, even going into, meetings like COP27, because the world, for me, I've seen that we're caught in this whirlwind of when the world is, especially the Western nations, going in one direction. But the problems that we face on this continent seem to be a little bit different than in terms of priority. But now, this gospel that we are preaching, are we now saying that it then must be applied to our situation as it is? Or are we taking on things like the rest of the world is when we then come to climate change, when we come to environment, when we talk about the sustainability conversation?
Well, traditionally, we used to take things from others. But I must say now we've gotten to a level of maturity as a continent, as an example, where we are saying, wait a minute, this worked in the Western world, it cannot work for the global South. But for us, for it to work, this is exactly what we need it to look like. Now, unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges is things like financing. Because indeed, for us to be able to change the way things are done, for instance, we are talking about fossil fuels. We need to transition from use of fossil fuels to more greener alternatives. Now, that costs money. Where is that money going to come? Well, already in 2009, 2008 in Copenhagen, in COP15, a commitment of $100 billion was committed by developed countries to help developing countries. What have we seen? In COP26, we are discussing it. They need to show the commitment. The money need to flow. And I hope, now that we have an African COP in Egypt in November, that those are the objectives that we'll be able to achieve, and seeing the 100 billion, coming to help us. To kind of customize some of those things working in the West so that they can be able to fit for us. Of course, we've also preached the gospel of mitigation for many years. And mitigation, friends, is about, where we try to reduce the emissions. Climate change is about emissions. So if we reduce the emissions, then we can be able to avoid the temperatures rising to 1.5 and beyond. Now, but for Africa, climate already changed. So we must deal with the impact of that change. And how do we deal with that impact? Adaptation. And adaptation is a way of dealing with those changes. And this is what we need to champion. Of course, we can talk about mitigation, but the effort should be about adaptation. And that's what means that is relevant for the continent. And I do hope in COP27 in Egypt, an African COP, this is one of the things that we'll be championing and saying it is our time now to tell the world what we need to do, and probably even give good examples.
UN Climate Change Conference taking place on African soil in November, Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. This comes after last year's COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. There, Kenya was shining, and Kenya also made several commitments, and Kenya has been making several commitments on what we can do as a country towards achieving our own contributions to fighting climate change or combating climate change. Now, we'll be talking about what those commitments have been and how far we've gone in realizing our own commitments and what we should then be championing as we go towards Egypt. Let's take a break. It's 28 minutes to 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Dr. Edward Mungai is a global sustainability expert. He's a lead consultant at KCIC Consulting Limited. Benedict Tomolo is a chief officer, operations and strategy at Standard Group PLC. We are talking about the journey to COP27 in November, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. multisectoral commitments to achieving Kenya's nationally determined contributions to combating climate change. We'll be back shortly. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Dr. Edward Mungai is a global sustainability expert, lead consultant at KCIC Consulting Limited. Ben Omolo, Chief Officer, Operations and Strategy at Standard Group Center. We're talking about the journey to COP27, Africa's COP. The first time in a long time when Africa is actually hosting the UN Climate Change Conference in November. There must be something that we are doing, coming together as a country, as organizations in this country, to prepare ourselves towards going into Egypt. Ben, what is happening so far from the corporate side, from government?
So on the 6th of July, we had initially partnered with KCIC, Standard Group and KCIC. We brought in various stakeholders so that we would then launch our journey to COP. We had a breakfast that was graced by the CS, Environment and Forestry, Kariako Tobiko, and we shared the journey that we want to do. So various things that we would be able to bring about so that then the corporate world and especially more Kenyans would have the opportunity to understand and domesticate the challenges of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we hope to do is to be able to, as a Standard Media Group, provide Planet Action as a platform through which we would be able to create awareness, would be able to share what corporates are doing, and be able to ensure that more and more Kenyans can understand the aspects and the impact of climate change. I think one of the takeouts of that breakfast was that the CS mentioned that we need to appreciate that our globe or the earth is on fire. Things are changing. And I think shortly after that, we have all these heat waves across Europe. But we as Africans would bear the biggest brunt. We contribute very little in terms of the impact, but we bear the brunt of it.
Yeah.
And so we've got to understand what we can do to bring about the transformation in terms of our habits, our behaviors, to solve this problem. So there are several initiatives we will be doing. We look forward to launching a Climate Innovative Challenge so that the young people in Kenya who have got good ideas would be able to share some of the things that they're doing. And with the corporates, we would be able to partner and roll those ones out. So we hope to have it as a reality TV show so that then we would highlight some of the innovative approaches and different things the young people are doing or corporates are doing, highlight all that. Subsequent to that, we hope to have a funding session so that we would then be able to evaluate 3 or to 5 based on different topics so that then we would have the same innovators pitch to those who would be able to fund or scale some of the concepts. I think in that approach, we would be able to find some local solutions to our local problems. How do we then ensure that more and more people understand? And I think it's in this regard where we hope to see also a couple of the MSMEs, because that's where really the economic change could happen. As we get the young people, those who are trying to do business, if they change their habits, the multiplier effect would be much larger.
That's what I was going to ask. That what benefits then does something like this then have for the rest? Because, you know, in development circles, we always say development begets development. If you see something like this happening, then you're more inclined to jump on the bandwagon and go with it. Would that be the end goal of something like this, to get more and more to be within those same circles?
Precisely. And so one of the things that as we work together in this partnership with KCIC, KEPSA, is to be able to ensure that the SMEs get the benefits, whether it's the funding side or certification. There's something that comes in so that then we would be able to ensure they have got better customers. Customers get to understand their products. Their products are then treated differently in terms of the consciousness of the Kenyan customer would then appreciate that these SMEs are sustainable, they are working hard to improve and to combat the effects of climate change. So we hope that that would help the SMEs get some benefits. I think also in that regard would be to lobby. You've got to lobby in terms of would some of these SMEs get some benefits? Because there's a cost to it, whether it's a tax rebate or something. We've got to find ways of creatively ensuring that the businesses, even the smaller ones, have a kind of benefit for what they're doing. Yeah.
And I think to that point, it's also about, looking into cases and examples, as you are saying that, the more you see things changing, the more you want, to embed them into your organization. And truly, it's also a forum where, people will be showcasing what is working as far as sustainability or climate change is concerned. And therefore, then people, either in SMEs or in big corporates, they can be able to see, what are the best practices. And with those best practices, then they can be able to go home within their organization and probably implement, and we can be able to have that change that we all want.
Right.
So it's basically also the media playing its part in awareness creation. Like Situ was asking, how do we spread the message? And also start with the small businesses, the young people, like you're saying, the young people starting to see, getting encouragement for the kind of innovations that they're coming up with that are about adapting and combating climate change.
Yeah, indeed. And so what we've done is to provide our platform, Planet Action. So we look forward to having not only a monthly magazine, but we also want to have a TV roundtable. You have different players coming in, CEOs, people or experts in sustainability like Dr. Mungai, and having conversations in terms of how do you do it? How do you share best practices? How do you report? We also look forward to having conversations on radio, whether SpiceFM or Radio Maisha. You reach out more to the people. Questions can be asked in terms of why do we need to do this? Does it make sense? Of course, one of the things as an African you'd ask, if we're contributing so little, why should we be the ones to bear the cost, and why should we change? Let those other guys change. But
fix it,
but it's going to be something which we have got to contribute and play our part. So we look forward to having podcasts and conversations where then we can be able to give the evangelist the opportunity, and we hope that some will be converted in the process, and then we could get into the discipleship so that we sustain that behavior and the habit changes.
Dr. Mungai's letters to the Galatians and the others.
But isn't that a thing? I mean, and I know we've had conversations before where I have said, why are we insisting on the global south taking the responsibility for something that they had very little to do with in the first place, But then isn't that something that you have to contend with on a regular basis, that, look, all right, what are we going to do with a situation that is already gone to the dogs? And we are still living in this environment. So then what then is the message that, okay, sure, we understand. You didn't contribute largely to the mess up, but you can contribute largely to fixing the problem.
And I think that's the basis of the $100 million that was being put up by the developed countries to support the developing countries. And yes, we have had this conversation before where, we even reflected on John Githongo's book about it is our time to eat, but it's also, we can argue it's our time to pollute. But unfortunately, we are facing the biggest impact of this. And that's why it is important, as we try to champion, as we try to fix the problem, we need those that, had industrial revolution and benefited from it, because, that was the beginning of, huge human-driven climate change. They need to contribute. And this is one of the big objectives or expectations that I do have, and many people have when we go to Sharm el-Sheikh in November, where we will be able now truly to see us moving from talk, not what I call NATO, no action, talk only, to where now we talk about action. And we see, the $100 billion, flowing to the global south to try and fix the problem. Of course, that doesn't mean that we go up in arms and we start polluting. We must be responsible citizens, because indeed we are facing the biggest challenge when it comes to climate change.
Outline these challenges that we are facing and the brunt that we keep saying we bear the bulk of. What are these things?
Well, interesting. I mean, let's look back. For instance, the seeds that my mother used to plant 10 years ago. If she tried to plant those seeds it will not have any yields. Unfortunately, they've been planting those seeds. Now, we need technologies that will improve the seeds to live with the impact of climate change. Now, from that perspective, agriculture is one of the most affected. We used to have proper seasons. Yes. We knew that 15th of March, all of us should go ahead and plant. Today, we haven't even seen the rains. What is the reason for that? Is global warming, is climate change. When it rains with more intensity than we had seen before. This country, 2% probably of the GDP is lost as a result of climate change. You know, the dilapidation of the infrastructure, all the challenges that we see, loss of productive time and capacity, all that is impact of climate change, which in any case we never contributed to. And therefore we must be compensated. In fact, one other conversation that is going on, and I hope that within, you know, COP27 will be put on the spot and we'll have action, is what we call loss and damage. Because we've seen losses and damages as a result of climate change. Now, there is debate that we should be compensated for that. And there should be a special fund for that, which will be able to compensate like this 2%. Of course, there are many issues to be discussed there, like how do you quantify that? How do you measure? How do you actually attribute to climate change? But indeed, Article 8 of the Paris Agreement is something that we expect a lot of conversation and, you know, clarity. And getting funds that then would be help us to solve this, you know, impact that we are talking about.
You know, there's a school of thought that looks into the Earth's history and goes 800,000 years ago, etc., etc. And they say climate change didn't begin with this century or the previous one. It's been there for the longest time. We've had the Ice Age, issues to do with heat-driven situations that bring about these wildfires, and they've been there for the longest time. It's just, and they also argue that it's just that this particular cycle has found us in this particular century. But they also argue that some of these changes that used to take many, many years before they occurred are now moving rapidly. Could then one argue that we have been depleting the resources of this planet and we've slowly been doing the very things we shouldn't do, so that what was considered a natural process has been hastened but with disastrous consequences. And so now we are now facing the full consequences of our, I'm looking for a polite word, neglect.
And that's what it is. I mean, climate will still change. The only problem that we have seen is that that change have increased significantly. Why has it done that? It's because of our human activities. And that is what all these conversations is all about, probably with not much action to try and reduce the amount of emissions that we are making. Now, in 2015, Barack Obama told us a very interesting thing, that we are the first generation that will be able to see the real consequences of climate change. But we are also the last generation that can be able to do something about climate change. And that is what we are all called for. We must change the way we consume, we must change the way we produce, and hopefully we can keep temperature rise to less than 1.5 degrees centigrade, which then will mean we curtail, you know, big changes in terms of our climate.
Go ahead.
If we're looking at economies that are split, so that you have rural-urban economies, and we're talking about these conversations where we're talking about buying sustainable product, unfortunately, or please stop me if I'm wrong, will happen in urban areas where you're able to push out this information. How do you move this information across board? Or are we saying that it doesn't matter in some areas because more often than not, you're eating, you know, directly from the land as opposed to, you know, going and purchasing in the supermarket, like you gave an example of?
Yeah. I mean, look at it from, you know, we talk about global north and global south. Also come to our local context and look at it from the urban versus the rural areas.
Yes.
So the people in the urban, somehow we must, and I guess that's why, you know, we have this journey to COP, you know, as a way of trying to help those people in the rural areas to understand more what it means, because they do also have, you know, things and they can be able to do to change the change, or rather to have effect on the change of climate change. And to me, I think what matters is that education that we are talking about, that awareness that Ben is talking about, is what we need to drum up in the villages, in the local areas, and in a language they can truly understand. Because this is also the other unfortunate thing, that the language and the way we have communicated before is not exactly, something that they can be able to understand. A good example, is about, cook stoves. We talk about energy efficient cook stoves. And I can tell you for the last 45 years, in this country, we've been talking to people in the rural areas that you need to move away from wood fuel and you move on to clean cook stoves. But what happened? Because of the way we were communicating that, we were not connecting it with their health, with their livelihoods, with their disposable income. But the moment we connect it, then they see all of a sudden, yes, if I use my cook stove, it means savings on my wood fuel. It means better, for environment, and also health-wise is a good thing. Now, if you communicate that way, and I guess that's the role of Journey to COP, where we are looking for partners who can help us, to evangelize this message, especially to the rural areas. And also, obviously, to have more people in the urban areas, meaning companies also taking, actions and trying to help those in the rural areas to be able to move
What would such conversations look like, Ben? It's almost like a no-brainer when we're talking about communication in the urban area and trying to pass a particular message. But then using medium, how then would that conversation look like now when we're making the crossover from urban to rural?
Yeah, and that's why we hope to use all our platforms as a media house, because we are able to then communicate in, like on Radio Maisha, which would be in Kiswahili, would be able to then have good translation. I think the issue that we have is to tell the stories. You share the stories of the impact, the stories of success in terms of change. When people testify and share the positive side of what has changed, let's just take the example of the cook stove. By just saying and telling the stories of healthier living, the effects that it has on the eye, the chest, and your savings in terms of your medical costs. That's it. Those who would be able to tell the stories of better seed and productivity, because they have adapted a different style of farming or a different style of storage. Those who are able to tell the stories of healthier living because of the choices they have made. That's what we want to do. And we want to be able to communicate it throughout our different platforms so that we are then able to convert and people would be able to adapt the lifestyle and the choices that are offered to them. So that is how we really intend to do it.
One other thing, and Ben probably should also emphasize on this, is also that we've been very keen also looking at the manifestos. We are in elections, and we are trying to also to engage, with the politicians and those who are vying to see how then they can be able to articulate these issues to Kenyans. And for instance, we've seen in countries where elections have been won, based on commitments to climate change. We want to get our politics to that level where we can see politicians and looking in the manifestos and saying what is the real, thing that they can be able to do for our climate. And indeed also having town halls and things like that, which is part of the journey to see is what we are committing to be able to do.
Which would also be informed by what we've already committed internationally. This brings us to the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, and what we go and tell the world that we are committing to do. What have we committed?
Well, yeah, Kenya is very ambitious, and I think it's a good thing that the government of Kenya have been, playing the leading role of creating an enabling environment. And I think that's the role of government. In that direction, already in 2015, we committed that we are going to cut our emissions by 30%. Now, in 2021, to be precise, 27th of December, the government wrote to the UNFCCC saying, we want to change that and we want to increase it 32%. Now, the consequences of that is moving from 30% to 32% obviously comes with requirement for resources. In fact, to quantify it is 400 billion shillings is required for 30% every year. Not extra, every year.
Every year.
Now, with 32%, we require 600 billion shillings every year for climate change for the next 8 years. Now, what is the government doing in regards to that? And very cleverly, we are putting regulations that then will enable private sector, as an example, to push toward that journey. A good example and a case in point, 15th of October, the Central Bank of Kenya released a guidance which told all banks, you must behave. Behaving is meaning that you must be able to take your resources towards climate change. And today, all the 43 or so banks are regulated as far as climate change is concerned. So that's how, trickling down from the 32% that we committed and coming back to the local scene
To
and
the
trying to see
actualization,
how
right.
do we push the resources in that. Unfortunately, many of these organizations, and including banks and including companies, see climate change as a risk.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a risk and we must manage the risk, but it also presents a lot of opportunity. There are new products, the solar that we was talking about, the efficient cook stoves, the water recycling. Those are products that we didn't have 15 years ago. But for those who saw it as an opportunity, they are producing, new products. The banks now will have sustainable finance, climate financing, and that's create opportunity. So indeed, the government, is trying its bit, as far as that NDCs, National Determined Contribution, is concerned. And I think, generally we are doing okay. In fact, in the continent, we must say we are on the front line, but we still need to do more. I mean, we can still do more.
What informed the government's decision to increase our commitment from 30 to 32%?
I think is obviously, the fact that we see that I talked about the 2% of the GDP being lost because of issues of climate change. Now, the more we become better to managing to get 1.5 degrees centigrade, the better we can be able to reduce that, 2% to say 1%. Now, to be able to do that, we must be able to put a higher level of emissions. Remember the emissions, we are saying we cut our emission by 30%. If we cut it for 40%, which is, an ambition that I would like, to challenge the government. From COP26 now, they have to review the NDC every year. I would like to see that, when you are going to COP27, they say it's 35. Because then it puts pressure on people, organizations to be able to head toward that. Of course, the enforcement of that and administration of that is a critical element, and government needs, together with the help of private sector, academia, and civil society, figure out how can we be able to, achieve these commitments that we've made.
Something that has happened in that particular sphere with developing countries and manufacturing countries, rather who are big on manufacturing, is that to show that they have reduced the emissions that are brought about by the industries, they've moved the industries to countries that have very, very low emissions to speak of. Now, I see a situation where there'll be more and more of this. What exactly is being done to, should we say, address this?
Yeah, it goes back, to what we are talking about initially about sustainability. Because what does sustainability mean? Does it mean within this building, if we are doing good things and we don't care what is happening outside, then we are sustainable? Indeed, no. It means that you must be able to trace. Let me give you an example. In around early 2000s, Nike, the shoe company, had a lot of problems. Problems because they are producing in Southeast Asia and were producing in the worst possible scenarios. Now, because of that, people figured it out, and figured it out what they were doing, and they boycotted the products. So basically what I'm saying is that even if we transfer our production to Uganda, to Nigeria, to China, we are still accountable. And through this journey of sustainability, we have boundaries. And those boundaries covers us, those who are outside us, and including our suppliers. And we must make sure that they are also, getting to that sustainability. And remember, it's a collective action, for all of us, whether we are in China, whether we are in Kenya, we must champion towards that journey. Of course, we have seen some countries resisting, but, those are the geopolitics of the day.
That's what happens in the world. Evangelist Dr. Edward Mungai, an evangelist on matters of sustainability, global sustainability expert, a lead consultant at KCIC Consulting Limited. There's a comment that is on the mentions column. Someone had said maybe what Dr. Mungai could do is consider for your organization to have a sustainability index that informs on the general population on various companies and their rankings when it comes to sustainability.
Right, and well, of course, as an organization, probably we need just to speak to Nairobi Security Exchange and, motivate them towards that journey. And in the recent past, what I've seen, with our collaboration also with the Nairobi Security Exchanges, KCL, we've seen, them putting in the idea of having, sustainability reports, which is a way towards that journey.
All the best with that. And thank you very much for joining us this morning. Ben Omolo as well. He is the Chief Officer in charge of Strategy and Operations at the Standard Group. Asanteni sana for joining us.